Hello everybody, this is Yasmin from Yarkspiri fantasyart.com. Today I'm actually drawing something cute. I don't normally draw anything cute. I normally draw things that have some sort of violence to them. But in this case, I actually wanted to try to draw something cute. Now, because this isn't something I do ever, I had to do a lot of research on this, so I had to actually look at a lot of different animal births. So I was looking at birds, what they look like when they were just first born or really young. I also looked at kittens, lizards, snakes, possums actually, and bats. So by doing all that referencing before I actually started on the piece, I already had a general idea of what most animals look like when they were being born, or when they were extremely young. So this creature, because it is a dragon, I did have to base certain parts of the anatomy on a bat, and then the rest of the parts off rodents. The main reason why I chose those animals specifically is because they look somewhat similar to each other, so it was easier to combine the two animals, especially at that age. Now, most babies, when they are born, most of them are actually very similar in nature, or at least the ones that are any rodent tends to look like this, and bats obviously do look like this a lot more. I did find that reptiles, however, they pretty much just look like shrunken versions of the adults, and because it was so similar, even though it was a dragon design, and technically depending on which version of mythology you're looking at, they are slightly reptilian-like. Now, I'm coming from this on a different angle. So I did want to make it more of a mammal-type creature. And for that reason, the animal that was the closest to both reptiles and mammals in how it's born or when it's very young is actually birds. Now, they do share quite a few characteristics that are similar, and that you can really tell or see close up when you're looking at the feathers of of birds in general. They also are born from eggs, so it is somewhat reptilian-like in that manner. And that's the main reason why I did look at a lot more bird reference when I was actually drawing this. So you will see a lot of bird type aspects to this little fella, because that was mainly what I was referencing. Now, I do want to try a couple different versions of this, but different styles, so I'm probably going to look at different animals next time. But for this one, I did want to focus mainly on the bird aspect and how it's kind of related to lizards, but mammals at the same time. So what I had to do once I had my reference material, and for this reference material, I just went on YouTube and typed in baby births and like animal births and all that, and I got a bunch of references from that. I did a bunch of anatomy quick sketches so that I had a general idea of how the general anatomy was. I was also looking for posing idea when I was doing this, which is why I was looking for video reference in this case. I did want to see how these little fellows were all shaky and how they were uncertain about moving about and how they moved. And what I noticed is that birds in general, they have a completely different movement compared to bats. Bats, they're very mobile on all fours, whereas birds, on the other hand, they pretty much immediately start walking as soon as possible. So the back legs took a while to figure out how I was going to do those anatomically. Now, I did settle on to using the more bat-like hind legs. The reason why I did that is because it was more suited for the pose that I was aiming for as well. That, and bats do tend to have a longer tail in which the membrane actually stretches from throughout the size of the tail to their legs. That allows them to control which direction they're gliding in. or flying in general. Birds, they don't have that. They have a very stubby tail underneath all the feathers. You don't see that obviously because of the feathers. But because they do have feathers that grow on their tail, they just have a little stub. Now, because I was aiming for more mammal-like creature, I did want to have a longer tail because most mammals do have fairly long tails. So that was another aspect of the design that I had to modify animal-wise to make sure it correlated with the design I was aiming for. So that's where getting several different sources of reference really does help. I looked at, well, I didn't spend an overly large amount of time doing this. For me, I only spent maybe an hour referencing. For me, that's actually really short. I discovered most babies around that age are actually really similar. And it kind of makes sense because when humans are in the embryonic stage, they are going through a couple different stages where they actually look very similar to other animals' embryonic stages as well. So I kind of wanted to tie that in. So the design changed accordingly. Now, because I did want to have this dragon have independent arms from the wings, I did add the extra arms in front and then the wings above. Like, I haven't drawn that yet, but you will see it later on in the video. I had to do some tweaking on the tail lengths though, because although most babies that do have long, or most animals that do have long tails, they do have somewhat long tails when they're born. Not all of them have fully extended tails. They do tend to grow out a bit. Now, because this is a dragon, I kind of went in between that, so it's almost a full length, but not quite a full length for a tail. And you'll also notice that this little guy has cat-like ears. That's where I got the reference for the cat and how I applied it to this character as well. Now, I did need to make it, the character did look very much like, well, a bird, mainly because I referenced both birds and bats the most. So I had to add extra details to make sure it was distinguishable and unique from those animals as well. So that's why you'll notice that the nose is slightly different. Although it's a beak, it has that extra dip within the nostrils. Also has some of the plumage on the side of its jawline. Although technically that's not realistic because when animals are just born, that takes a while to grow in. But in order to reinforce that it was a dragon and not another mammal, I did do that. Another main key difference is I did borrow some of the anatomy ideas for the wings from both the bird, so you'll notice that it has a bird-like appearance to the wings. However, it also has a bit of that bat-like appearance in how it's actually structured. One thing that I did find quite interesting when I was referencing birds is that when they don't have their plumage, it literally looks like they have mitten hands on the tips of their wings. I did not know this until I actually looked at the reference. But they look like little mini human hands, actually. Obviously, they're midden-light, so they're not separated. But that's the main difference between a bat infant and a bird infant. When a bat is born, they actually have their fingers, or the fingers that help support the wings, fully extended, and there's already the skin that's already stretched out onto those wings as well. Whereas with the bird, because it's all plumage, they don't have that. So that's where I borrowed some of the wing ideas from the bat. Although it does have a characteristic of a bird-like appearance to them. They're both very similar, but in this case I did reference more to bat for the wings. So yeah, whenever you're referencing something like this, it is good to look at a lot of animals and see how they're actually structured, because it really does help you combine and make these judgment calls on the overall design for the character. or in this case, the little baby dragon. Now, as you can see, I also started, like you see me always start, pretty much exclusively, I always start with the grayscale. I definitely had to do grayscale in this case because I wasn't certain about the structure, whether it was going to work or not. It wasn't until it was fully rendered and then I had fully fleshed out the actual structure of the little guy that I was actually comfortable with enough in finalizing it. Until it was actually finished, chances are I was actually probably going to scrap it because I didn't actually like the design until near to the end, which is normal. I do sometimes get almost fully completed pieces and decide, this is just not working as a design, I have to restart. I do try to finish it though, because in this case, obviously, I'm happy I finished it because it did pay off. But sometimes I'll make those calls where this is just not working, I've tried everything, I just need to start from scratch. So being able to tell the difference of whether or not to stay with a drawing or to restart is very important too. Because once you get that blank canvas, you have to realize that you've wasted a couple of hours, most likely, or at least a couple of minutes doing rough sketches that you could have been using to finalize an image. And maybe you have a deadline. If you have a deadline, then you really have no choice at that point to finish the image. But obviously I didn't have time restraints on this one, and it turned out okay, so I didn't have to worry about that. Now, because I did want to emphasize the motion in the scene, I went with very simple colors. They're all bluish colors, and I did want the emphasis to be on the little newborn dragon. So for this reason, all the light is going towards that character and is highlighting that character in the nest, because it is the focus point of this drawing. So this was actually a really fun drawing. I've never drawn a baby ever. So for me, this was a huge challenge. But like I said, the key thing to any challenge is getting reference material that is suitable for the character design. And in this case, it obviously paid off thanks to the reference. I'm probably going to try one or two more baby dragons in the future, just because this was a really fun exercise, even though it was actually really difficult for me to do. But it was a really good learning experience. So yeah, I'm definitely going to do this again in the future. So thank you for watching. I hope you tune in next week. Thank you and take care.